Claudio, how are you, sir?
I'm very well. Very excited to be here.
Man, I'm so pumped we got a chance to sneak out from the convention. You work for Idaho Geological Survey, which means you know a lot about the natural earth that we're all sitting on. You have more data than anybody else running around, and you guys, being a nonpartisan, non-industry agency, are really charged with just studying and understanding what we're dealing with in the state of Idaho and providing that information to a myriad of industries. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So we are with a state agency. We are targeted to collect all things geological for the state of Idaho, so that we have a wealth of information that is available to the public, whatever extraction the public is, to use.
Okay, help me understand this now. Like, as ignorant as this may sound, I was ill-informed about the nature and unique aspects of Idaho from a natural resource position, right? It's called the gem state. There's a miner on the flag. Like, I get it. I should have understood. But in a contemporary manner, this is something that is still, like, Idaho is very unique contemporarily right now as far as the number of minerals we have, access to those minerals, things like critical minerals that classically they're designated critical because we don't have access to them currently in America. Idaho stands kind of head and shoulders above other people with access and wealth of resources in this manner. Is that accurate?
Well, that's for sure. So Idaho is definitely in a unique position in the mineral world and in the natural resources scenario at large. We are lucky and blessed with a large endowment in mineral resources. We have been seeing a lot of interest in exploration for what we are calling critical minerals, which are called critical minerals because there are subject to the push and pull of the political games and scheme of different nations, and we are dependent from large import volume for them. And so there are kind of very specific factors that the U.S. Geological Survey determined to deem a mineral to be critical. We have a super long history of mining in Idaho. As you said, no, the miner is on the flag. District like the Silver District has been worldwide recognition for production in silver and other elements. The phosphate is a super large industry as well currently, but we have seen the resurgence of interest for much more extraction in Idaho, and we are hoping that becomes to fruition in a place that we can do it responsibly. Our agency try to provide enough data to support and guarantee that's a reality.
When you talk about responsible mining, this is one of the things that it's almost the mining tragedies of the United States and the mining industry worldwide are really vestiges of a time when we didn't have regulation on industry in the same manner. We didn't have technology that we have today. And there wasn't, as whatever people think about this, like, we didn't have the same kind of corporate expectation and responsibility where it's like, no, man, like, you can't just come rape, pillage, and steal and drop everything. For instance, it's my understanding within the mining industry that you have to essentially bond up front so that if your company goes bankrupt, there's enough funds available to clean up the site from whatever you were doing. Like, that's accurate, correct?
That's the intent. It wasn't always the case, but that is the intent right now. So
right.
That we guarantee that if a company just bails out and leave, we are not left with no means to solve that problem. So there is bonding up front that is fundamental for that kind of preservation and stewardship of the environment as the industry comes in and out.
And the big problems that we saw in the American mining industry, these are things that occurred like decades and decades and decades ago, long before we had those obligations in place, correct?
Well, that is correct. I mean, it's hard to say that the mining industry is a risk-free industry.
Sure.
There will be ludicrous and kind of childish to think, but what we know and what we do is that we put enough regulations, enough stoppers, enough guarantees in place so that we can manage that industry as they access the natural resources, and they also allow us to the fruition of the benefits of those resources that they access through. Now, many times we think about the mining industry has the gold producer or the silver producer or as a wealth that doesn't touch the individual citizen. Well, what we're seeing today is that the mining industry actually access minerals and commodities and elements that affect our common life and everyday life, and from our national security, from our economy, from our technology. And we citizen directly benefits from that. It's a big shift. He's thinking of, oh, he's producing gold. I'll never see that. I don't have a lingot of gold under my bed,
sure.
but I certainly have a phone in my pocket, and that is a complete change in scenario, complete change in balance. Today we rely on those elements coming from somewhere else, and we think that we kind of outsource the risk and the disaster and the natural disasters. So you were mentioning we do this in the U.S. where there is a lot of regulations, there is a lot of safety mechanism, and that is not true anywhere else or in many other places where a lot of the industry is ongoing. And so what we had as a problem of the past of 100 years ago, 50 years ago, these problems are still true in many other parts of the world. And those parts of the world is where today we take those minerals.
I did know that we were sourcing minerals from less responsible means, like, 6-year-olds in the Congo. I recognize that, but I really hadn't put two and two together that it's like, hey, look, the horrible things that were happening in the U.S., say like 100 years ago, they're still happening. Absolutely. They're just not happening in the U.S. and the U.S. is still benefiting from them. So is there really a difference? Is there any world where we could pat ourselves on the back for being so environmentally friendly or paying attention to humanitarian suffering and things like that, and being like, we don't do this for our consumer goods. Like, we have these regulations, but we buy from that guy and he doesn't care at all. And then, what's our responsibility there?
Well, that's right. It's a little bit of the ostrich technique. So you put your head under the sand, fake that those things are not happening and pretend that those things are not happening. Interesting enough, a lot of the push to bring mining back into the first world countries is actually coming from consumers. And so, for example, cobalt for batteries, Tesla went through and other battery producers have been, or electric vehicles producer have been through the hurdles of realizing that the base of their consumer is actually now requesting that those products, those elements are ethically sourced. And so that has been putting a lot of pressure on the industry to make sure that they have a better understanding of where those commodities come from.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Is that something that these industries are going through? Like, where is the large consumer advocacy group that's saying like, hey man, where'd you get the cobalt?
Yeah, so I couldn't cite what are those consumer group, but there has been a lot of pressure on some of those things, and I can get back to you.
It's fine. It's fine. Yeah.
And so sometimes it's possible. Some other times it's actually almost impossible. So, for example, cobalt is one perfect example on which we can only understand so far where we can trace those elements back only so far because cobalt is brokered. That means that at some point, some company buys a ton of material from a myriad of different sources, and really bringing those back sources and understanding where those are coming from is pretty much impossible. And so
we get source materials from so many different places, we can't actually track it back.
Exactly. We can't actually track it back. What we know is that when we see where the cobalt industry is, for example, in other parts of the world, or the DRC for naming one, we know that there is a lot of those producers that are certainly not socially responsible or environmentally responsible in any way.
The cobalt or the potential cobalt industry in Idaho came into sharp contrast and focus. It was like a year ago when there was the water call, right? So there's a water call in Idaho for essentially the Snake Plains Aquifer, yeah. Right? And people tied that to a need for water in cobalt mining. Now, mind you, there were 2 Jervois cobalt mines in Idaho. One was near on the Snake Plains Aquifer that has been defunct for like 5, 6, 7 years. It's not operational, but there was another in the salmon watershed, correct, I believe, that was the actual, there was discussion of funding for that from the Department, I think it was Department of Defense, and yeah, essentially trying to get this mineral. Now, these are 2 completely different water systems, and so the idea that there was a water call because of this cobalt mine was a total lie, because again, we're talking about 2 completely different parts of the state. However, it did start the conversation around, okay, well, what what about cobalt coming from Idaho? And that project still hasn't gotten off the ground for a multitude of reasons, correct?
Well, the project went off the ground at some point. The mine was actually open and inaugurated with a large celebration. The Governor Little participated in that. The ambassador from Australia was there because of Jervois being an Australian company. And then the price of cobalt tanked and forced the Idaho Cobalt, the Jervois, in changing their operation and to kind of stop the Idaho Cobalt operation up in the Salmon Mountains. Certainly, the water was not the reason for that, and as you were mentioning, it was completely unrelated. Is mostly a price commodity that kind of made the operation unfortunately uneconomical. The mine is still ready to go if there was a change in price, and we are actually trying to work with those companies to expand our understanding of the mineral system. There's a lot of things that we don't understand, and we try to learn from an operation like the Idaho Cobalt operation on how the cobalt system works, so that we can actually possibly find new areas where to look for future resources, as this operation has a limited volume of cobalt. It's not infinite. So we know that as we work on those deposits, we need to look for the next one, because the timing that it takes, the hurdles that it takes, and so that we can bring back something online or facilitate bringing back online.
With the cobalt market tanking, there has been a dynamic that has been explained to me that kind of goes like this. The United States is reliant on a critical mineral. Let's say cobalt. Cobalt's a critical mineral, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, it's a critical mineral because we are absolutely reliant on it either for economic or defensive capacity, and we cannot individually supply it for ourselves. So that's what makes it, if it's absolutely reliant for economic or defense, but we can supply it, it's not a critical mineral. Or if we don't need it for these things and we can't supply it, and we can't supply it, or they're like, it doesn't really matter, right? Like, it has to be those two things.
That is correct. It has to be fundamental for energy or security or national security. And we are reliant on external import for more than 50 or 60%. In the case of cobalt, we are almost reliant for almost 100%.
Okay. So the story that I've been told goes like this. We're reliant on for cobalt on, let's say, China. Okay. And again, I'm not saying it's 100% China, but this is what happens. We need it from China, and we know we need it from China, and we know we're in a bind because we're like, dang it, man, this is really, really important. We got to find a way to figure out how to get it from either ourselves or from someone else, right? We find it then in Idaho. And we're like, oh, wait, we either knew we had it here or we discovered here. We can get this out of Idaho. And let's say it's $100 a unit of cobalt, whatever the unit is, it doesn't matter. It's like, okay, can this company, can Jervois get this out of the ground and get it to us for at the $100 per unit price point? Jervois like, yeah, man, I think we can. Like, everybody starts working, you put all this energy into it, could be, a couple years or a decade or longer to get the mine up and ready to be operational, all of these things. But then the international markets, and specifically our supplier, China's like, hey, man, if they get that mine going, they're not going to need this. And the only reason they can get that mine going is because it's at $100 per unit. If we drop it to $90 per unit, even if we take a loss, we will maintain 100% market share of the cobalt consumption in the United States. And then the people around there like, drop it to like $80. So it goes from the $100 price point where Jervois could function in the black down to $80. So even if the original supplier is taking a loss or requires government subsidies, they maintain that market control, because as we're engaging in a capitalistic system, Jervois can't take a loss. They actually have to stay in the black and make a profit, or at least break even. They can't lose money indefinitely. And in that way, that's one of the international tricks that really hampers the increased production and in bulging industry around minerals in the United States. Is like, does that make sense?
Well, that is pretty accurate. And so the larger producer and those who are kind of almost maintain a monopoly of some of those commodities have the ability of flooding the market, right? And when you flood the market, eventually the price drops. And when the price drops, some of the smaller organization or the smaller operation can sustain that to be profitable at that cost. The numbers that you were throwing are indicative in the case of cobalt will be probably sustainable at $40 an ounce versus the current $14 an ounce.
So they slashed it over 50%.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Oh man, that's a big drop. So that is really one of the big things that stops America from being able to, like right now, I think somebody told me that we have 50 critical minerals. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's currently 50. The list is in review for about 54 or 55.
Okay. Hang on one second. Let me get this just a little bit close. There we go.
Okay, sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. Okay. Okay. So 54, 55. If Idaho functionally was able to mine successfully and responsibly in the manner that it could, how many of those 54 critical minerals could Idaho supply at a large enough volume or a large enough scale to start eliminating them off the critical mineral list?
Oh, this is a very good question. Certainly cobalt, antimony, silver, copper would be something that we can provide. There are a slew of other minerals like like rare earths, where the names are kind of barely pronounceable. And those are also there is potential for that also in Idaho. There is current exploration for that as well. Whether we are able to take them off the critical mineral list just as Idaho or not, that it's hard to say. But what we can do is that even a small input of national production for those minerals then can foster a much larger industry response, and, for example, can facilitate recycling of some of those elements. And so all of a sudden you have a return of investment, if you want, or kind of a snowball effect, where some production, even if it's let's call it minimal or marginal in the worldwide picture. Like, for example, we know that the cobalt that we have in the Idaho Cobalt Belt is not going to supply the entirety of the needs for cobalt in the nation, or certainly not in the world. We are order of magnitude below what the DRC has in their reserve. But a small could go a long way, especially if not only the upstream process, which is getting the minerals out of the ground, but then the processing, the smelting, the production also is done nationally, which is a whole different story, and maybe is a longer term issue that eventually the U.S. needs to deal with, to address.
Yeah.
That allow for an industry to have a lot of impact. The lithium is a perfect example, right? So we have lithium that has been looked at in Oregon and in northern Nevada, and at the same time there are batteries producers that are trying to establish their industry and their facilities into the Reno-Carson Valley. Now, if you have a mine that produces lithium and a battery production that uses the lithium and process the lithium, the next best step is recycling of lithium battery. Today, we don't do that because there is not enough. Well, it's
like
not
the market demand is.
It's not economical affordable. There is not enough recycling to make that work.
Sure.
But if you're producing, extracting, refining, and then you recycle, things come together, and then it's worth doing it. And so it's kind of a catalyst for solutions. And the cobalt extraction in Idaho will be the first step of that. Then we need to refine it. Then we need to produce it. So Gerard had, for example, some plans of possibly building a facility in the U.S., knowing that the U.S. production will not support enough material for a processing facility to do it, but then you can start bringing material from outside, and then you become a producer, and then now you also enhance your status as cobalt producer in the world. You're not just buying it, you are extracting it, you're producing it, you are getting it from other country, and you're exporting it.
There's a large argument, or at least a consistent argument, against the process that you just brought forth, because ultimately they're saying, look, if we do all of this in the United States, because of our regulations and all of that, it's going to cost the end consumer a lot more. So like, why are we doing this to our consumer and raising the price of things when we could just get it from elsewhere? But when people say that to me, or excuse me, when I share that with people, what most people end up saying is, okay, yeah, in the near term, we could save a buck by not making investments in refining, by not making investments in all these other things, and just buying it essentially a la carte without, it's nice and clean. I just give you the money and you give me the thing. But they always say, yeah, but the hidden cost of that is reliance, right? Because you will be forever reliant on that supplier. And ultimately, it's a near-term saving, because once you have 100% reliance on one particular provider, they could increase the cost past what it would have ultimately cost you to do it in-house. They just need to make sure that you have no other alternative, and then they can make the price whatever they want the price. So the end consumer may not really get the benefit anyway. Is that accurate?
Well, that is definitely a possibility, right? And then we also don't consider that for sure we get a done deal or a ready, key turnkey product by buying cobalt or whatever it is from someone else. But that process, it's extremely complicated. And so we pay for a lot of steps that we don't realize. We're not just paying for people digging out a mineral in somewhere and giving it to me. We're paying for that, then moving that material to a different continent, having it smelt, moving that material to another continent to having processed, moving that other material to another process to have it technologically installed, let's say, in a microchip, and then they sell me that microchip.
And everybody's making money
along the way. So the fact that there could be a higher price for some of the processing, some of the smelting nationally may actually cut some of the cost eventually. So if we get the material, we process it, we give it to Micron, and Micron builds it in Boise and give it to me here, I saved a lot of travel around the world, a lot of tariffs, a lot of extra cost, a lot of middlemen. And so the economics should be pretty, there is something to be looked at and decide what is actually cheaper. Something that costs more eventually may actually not be that more expensive.
There appears to be a real resurgence in interest in mining in the United States, not just for a myriad of reasons, right? But is part of it at least that so many of the things we engage in as consumers all use these, critical minerals or rare earth minerals, like on the quantities that we never consumed individually before?
Well, certainly, we're using more and more elements in
like
our technology.
Phones, iPads, everything here has
pretty much
stuff
everything that is in
the
the studio uses some critical mineral in one sort or another, and the fact that we are able to broadcast this is definitely based on minerals, right? And so there is definitely that need. There is also the understanding from people, but I guess the people is getting more and more sensitive to the fact that we actually are buying those things, and so we're not free. And we are, there are decisions that are imposed because we are hooked on our technology, and I think that people is starting to take a different view and understanding that there is certainly some benefits in having the freedom of choosing where you get your raw material to begin with. The demand is because of the technology. The shift in should we do it here in the United States versus let's let it do in Indonesia or in Central Africa, comes from a better understanding of the consumer that there are price to pay for that, and and all of a sudden, if one nation decide what kind of minerals you can get and at what price you can get, or holds you under their thumb by saying we're gonna shut off the faucet of antimony, for example, which China has just done, well, all of a sudden we realize that we need to let those countries do whatever they want, or they gonna play the card of, I'm not gonna give you breakfast today.
Right. And that was one of the big, at least as it was explained to me, that was one of the big arguments for the recent tariffs, which is, look, man, we need to have something on the table we can bargain with, because right now they got, as you're saying, like they got us under their thumb. Like we don't have antimony, we can't produce it, and we absolutely need it. We can't produce it at the level and the whatever the quantity, whatever it might be from China. So we either have to do what they want, or we have to have something that they want from us, right? They want access to our consumer market. And if we were going to give them access to our consumer market, which we have been doing at, low tariff price, then we need to get antimony back from them. But if they take the antimony away, we have to bring something to the table that then hurts them to a degree.
Until we have our own production of antimony, and then we can be seated at the same table and bargain, because we actually have the same commodity, and then we can decide more freely on how do we balance those equilibria. But certainly that could be one way of looking at the tariffs that give us some leverage one way or another.
Yeah. Is there a critical mineral or rare earth mineral that's coming into? I went down the Grand Canyon when I was like a kid. I was like 12, 11 or something. We're floating down the Grand Canyon. They're like, hey, this is like an old mine site in the Grand, wherever we were. And they were like, yeah, this place was kind of ahead of its time. They were looking for gold, but they found this other thing. I was a little kid. They were like, they found this other thing. It was really important for semiconductors, but they didn't have semiconductors at the time. So they just kind of like washed it away. But like now it's this really, really valuable thing. Are there minerals within Idaho that have classically been looked at as things that are of little utility, but are now coming into strong demand because of new technologies?
Well, I can tell you that there is certainly a lot of things that we haven't looked in Idaho as we were looking for minerals that we needed. So for example, the gold exploration, or the silver exploration, or the silver production, certainly have not always looked at a suite of critical minerals or a suite of elements that are possibly associated with those deposits, but they were just not needed. And so now we are in the situation of we need to take a fresh look at what we already have known or what we already had explored, to see whether we can recover some of those materials if there is an economy of scale of not recycling, but using some resources that are already being put in place. And so that kind of brings the other part of what we do as a survey, is that we're trying to collect some data that also are historic data, because in that wealth of knowledge, there is something hidden, and we can go and rediscover and point out that, yes, the gold or copper system also has gallium, also has cobalt, also has something else, antimony, and we can do it. So, for example, in the Silver Valley is actually a fantastic story. Silver Valley, of course, is a silver district, and they used to have in some of those mines have concentration of antimony, and they used to sell antimony at a loss, because antimony with silver used to be a detriment, so they had to pay penalties for that. And so now we are desperate for antimony, and in the past we just try to sell it at a loss, because we didn't want to sell it. We didn't want to send it to the processing for silver, because if there wasn't rich in antimony, it would have been more complicated to smelt it and to extract it, and so you would have to pay a penalty. And all of a sudden, antimony it's the mineral of the day, and so there is a lot of that for sure, and there's a lot of effort that we're trying to put in recovering a lot of the past exploration and see what material has been preserved, and reanalyze those material to see what can we add has a benefit. And I think there's something also important that your point brings up, is that people don't understand that a lot of the critical minerals, they don't have a high price point. Cobalt, we were just discussing that. They just don't. And maybe they will have it higher, that it makes it economically possible. But if they're not associated with other materials that really makes the money and really pays the bill for a mining industry, most of those will never come out of the ground. Antimony is the perfect example. And antimony can be taken out of the ground and serviced to the Department of Defense, folks like the Perpera folks or other producers in the area. They're looking for it, but it is associated with gold. And we always feel that there's a double side. There is people who's antagonistic to the mine, says, oh, those guys are just mining gold, and they are kind of telling us that they're mining antimony just to feel better. And then there is the Perpera folks or the extraction public that's trying to leverage on the fact that they are indeed producing critical minerals, because it's incredibly important, and that helps them enormously in permitting those mines. But truth of the matter is that as always, reason is kind of in the middle.
Sure.
if you didn't have gold in that property, you will never be able to get the antimony. There is just not enough money into it. And the same things is for cobalt, the same things is for rare earth, the same things is pretty much for every critical minerals. If you think that China has the hegemony or the control in critical minerals, they have the largest deposit in rare earth. Well, the deposit in rare earth in China is actually an iron deposit. And so it's mined because it's an iron oxide deposit. And that's what it made it possible. And they have the benefit of having this incredible enrichment in rare earth that makes them now the leading nation in rare earth production. But without iron, that mine will never be online.
I had no. Okay, so essentially the funding mechanism then is the things we really need, they're actually loss leaders because they're not that valuable they're not valuable enough to warrant all of the cost and expenditures to go along. So they have to be married to like a gold or a silver or say iron oxide,
Correct.
which is, hey, look, I can make an industrial scale mining operation that will be funded by this. And I need that to get this little last piece over here. But even though we really need this last piece, it's cost prohibitive because of what you have to go through.
That's correct.
So we may have we may have antimony sources or other critical mineral sources around the United States, but even if we identify them, harvesting them and realizing the benefit of them would be cost prohibitive if we don't have the supplemental, essentially commodity that's wrapped in there with it. It's like, great, it's right there, but it costs $10 billion to get it. And that resource on its own is only worth $5 billion. If we had another 10 billion in gold, we would have 15 billion collectively, and again, 10 billion to harvest it. So we could make a $5 billion profit and
That's
have
correct.
both of these things. But you need, these are always loss leaders. So you need the thing that makes money. And without that, you'll never be able to make an industry around it.
That's absolutely true. And that's why
wild. That's crazy.
That's why antimony in Central Idaho has been produced only in time of war, when there was no question asked about how much it costs, because that cost saves lives, right? And so the government was able to pay whatever it needed to be paid to extract it, to become leader in World War II and guarantee the safety of the let's say, the edge that allowed the U.S. to eventually win the war. And so the war effort value of antimony was priceless compared to the real price. But at this time of recent let's say
Peace and prosperity.
Peace and prosperity, at
Sure.
least we hope so. There is no way that we can pay for that. And this is true for pretty much everything. Like, if you go the large copper mine in South America, for example, those are just enormous, 10 times the scale that we can think about anything that will ever happen in Idaho. Those mines are copper, but they also are gold. They also have platinum. And, if you talk to those operators, they says, yeah, the gold and the platinum is the things that keeps the road open for me to get the copper. Without that gold and platinum, I would not be able to, have 100 miles of dirt road that has to be open in the middle of the winter in the high Andes at 14,000 feet. And the expenses are colossal. And that's what the gold for that property pays for. And so without gold, you can open a copper mine. Without gold, in Idaho, you can open an antimony mine. Without copper, you can open a cobalt mine.
Wow. That's wild. So ultimately, the articulation of people that are against the mining operations saying, hey, these people are really just in it for this one really valuable commodity. It's like everybody's in it for the valuable commodity, because without it, we'll never have it.
Correct.
That's why, but they don't say that.
But it's true both ways, right? I mean, certainly a gold mine could be a gold mine even without the antimony.
Sure.
But
and you can have companies that want to mine antimony, and they want to make a lot of money off the gold. But what kills me? When people are like, they just want to make money. It's like, okay. But hang on a sec.
Well, that's why I have a job and you have a job,
yeah,
right? Because we need the money to operate. And
are you really so confident you can reduce complex motivations and benefits for communities down to one thing? Like, if I do something that's say I'm a chef, I'm like an okay cook. So say you come to my restaurant and they're like, Matt just wants to make food because he wants to make money. I'm like, you are right. I want to make Claudio some food because I want to get Claudio's money. That's 100. And if Claudio wasn't paying me, I would not have this restaurant. I wouldn't have nothing. Right. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, but is Claudio worse off? Like, did you get harmed because I made you food? Like, you go home happy. You're like, I had this great meal. You tell your neighbors, they go out on a date night. They keep their marriage together. Good job, you. You know, like all of these. It's like, there's a lot of tangential benefit that comes from having selfish motivations, which is, yeah, maybe I do just want to make somebody dinner, but I also, these people are not worse off for it. And I'm not a bad person for wanting to make revenue and move along.
No, and I would say that I would believe that if you're a chef, you're also making that because you want to make money, but you also have satisfaction in knowing that I'm going happy home after a meal that I wouldn't have been able to have or enjoyed differently, right? And so this is true for pretty much every aspect. And so it is always when people is either too in favor or too antagonistic, there is always a one single element that we zero in. But the nature of it's much more complex. As a geologist, I know that for sure. And so the nature of every argument is complex, and we can't just look at from one single facet. That facet being tinted by I absolutely don't want this or I absolutely want this. Both sides will be very biased. The reality is that there is a wide spectrum of shades in between, and those shades are those that guarantee the operation that we need.
Man, these are wild times, Claudio. This is wild times. Listen, I know we're in the middle of the convention. I pulled you out to have this conversation. I really appreciate it. I'd love to do it again, but I don't want to take your whole day because I know there's a second day and we're in the last bit of it. Is there anything you'd like to add here at the end?
No, I mean, I think that we cover a few important topics. There's very, very many more, and I would love to talk about in the future. And I really appreciate the opportunity. For us is always it's good for us to take some exposure and hopefully show how a state like the state of Idaho try to put the support behind those operations that are fundamental to our to the prosperity, to the economy, rural community, our safety and security, and so that's that is a part of. Instead, as we were talking about satisfaction in the job, I think that's what makes our job satisfying, knowing that we are contributing to guarantee that the citizens of Idaho have the best service, and then they are guarantee safety and security and a good opinion and good decision because of what we do, and hopefully what we do guides the decision from the legislators and those who are the decision making.
Yeah, we can hope. We can hope.
We can hope.
We can hope. God bless it. Claudio, thank you for coming on. I promise we'll do this again if you're willing. I've really enjoyed this. I just don't want to take your whole day.
Thanks a lot. We'll be very happy to do that.
Awesome. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.